My brother looked me dead in the eyes across that conference table and said, "You should really be taking notes right now. This is how real business people operate." I smiled and wrote nothing down. He didn't know that I'd been the one who authorized the meeting. Let me back up. I grew up the second child in a family that had a very clear hierarchy, and I was not at the top of it. My brother Owen is 4 years older than me, and from the time he was maybe 12 years old, our parents treated him like he was already something. Like his future was a foregone conclusion, and everyone else's job was just to not get in the way of it. My father would take him to work on weekends. My mother would clip articles about young entrepreneurs and leave them on his pillow. At dinner time, Owen talked and everyone listened. I passed the bread. I don't say this to make you feel sorry for me. I stopped feeling sorry for myself a long time ago. I say it because you need to understand the scaffolding, the invisible architecture of a family, to understand how something like what happened can build up over 15 years and then collapse in about 45 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon in March. My name is City. I'm 31. I have a master's degree in finance from a state school that my parents thought was sensible but not impressive. A 7-year career in private equity that they thought was something with money, right? And an apartment in Denver that I paid for myself with money I made doing the thing they never fully understood. Owen has a LinkedIn profile with the word visionary in the bio. He wrote it himself. Our father built a mid-sized commercial landscaping company over about 20 years, Hartwell Grounds Management. Maybe 60 employees at its peak, a solid regional reputation, contracts with property management firms, and a few municipal clients. Dad was proud of it in a quiet, steady way. It was real. He built it with his hands, and then with his mind, and then eventually with his relationships. When I was in high school, I used to ride along with him on client visits in the summers and listen to him talk about cash flow and seasonal contracts and insurance liability, and even then, even at 16, I understood something important. This business was the family's actual foundation. Not our house, not our savings. Owen understood it differently. He understood it as something that would eventually be his. For most of my adult life, I watched Owen treat that assumption like gravity, invisible, unchallenged, operating whether or not anyone acknowledged it. He came into the business after 2 failed startup attempts that my parents funded, both times with money they told me wasn't really available right now when I asked about help with my grad school tuition. I worked 2 jobs and took out loans. Owen got 2 second chances and a salary. By the time I was 28, I had paid off my student loans, built up a solid investment portfolio, and started advising smaller companies on the side. I was good at seeing where a business was bleeding. It's the thing I'm best at, reading a balance sheet the way other people read body language. I can tell when something's wrong before anyone will admit it. And Hartwell was wrong. Had been for about 3 years. I noticed it at Christmas, the year Dad turned 62. He made a comment at dinner about restructuring some of the contracts, and Owen jumped in immediately, talking about pivoting the brand and going up market. And I watched my father nod, along with the expression of a man who knows the ship is listing but doesn't want to say it at Christmas dinner. I asked Dad later, quietly in the kitchen, if everything was okay. He said, "Owen has some ideas." That was all he said. I went home and spent 2 weeks thinking about it. Then I called a contact I had, a guy named Patterson who runs a small commercial real estate debt fund, and asked him very casually whether Hartwell had approached them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I probably shouldn't say anything," which told me everything. By February, I had a clearer picture. Hartwell had taken on debt to fund an equipment expansion. Owen had pushed for new fleet vehicles, a warehouse upgrade, the kind of capital expenditure that makes sense if you're growing and is catastrophic if you're not. They were not growing. 2 of their largest contracts had gone to a competitor that undercut them on price, and the municipal work was drying up because of a city budget reallocation. The company was cash flow negative. They had a balloon payment coming due in 7 months on a commercial real estate loan secured by my parents' property, the building where the company operated, which my parents owned outright. If they missed that payment, they would lose the building. And if they lost the building, the company was done. Owen's solution, as far as I could tell, was to rebrand the website and hire a social media manager. I did not tell my parents what I knew. I had tried once, 2 years earlier, to raise some concerns about the direction of the business at a family dinner, and Owen had talked over me for 4 minutes straight while my father looked at the ceiling and my mother refilled her wine glass. That was the last time I volunteered information in that house. Instead, I started making calls. I need to be precise here because the details matter and some people will tell you this was calculated and cold and maybe they're right. I called Patterson's fund. I asked about the note on the Hartwell property. I asked if they would entertain a conversation about acquiring the debt. They said they would. I asked what it would take. We talked numbers for about 3 weeks. In the end, I bought the note, the full commercial loan. I became, quietly and legally, and without telling a single member of my family, the entity holding the debt on my parents' building. I set up a small LLC to do it. Nothing shady. Everything above board. I paid a real estate attorney to make sure every document was clean. The LLC's name was anodyne enough that it wouldn't ring any bells. Something like Meridian Capital Holdings, the kind of name that sounds like it could be anything. Then I waited. I want to tell you I waited because I was patient. The truth is, I waited because I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I had bought the note as a protective measure, a way of making sure that if things collapsed, they wouldn't collapse in a way that left my parents on the street. But I didn't have a plan beyond that. I just knew I wanted to be in the room when the decisions got made, and this was the only way I could guarantee that. Owen provided the occasion in April. He called me, which in itself was notable because Owen calls me maybe twice a year and told me that the company was in transition and that he was bringing in outside capital and that there was going to be a meeting with investors and he thought I should come. He used the word optics. He said it would look good to have the whole family there. I said I'd come. What he didn't tell me, and what I found out from my mother the night before, was that Owen had found an investment group that was interested in buying a stake in Hartwell. He had apparently been telling them the company was a strong acquisition target with significant upside. He had sent them financials. My mother told me this like it was good news. She was using her hopeful voice, the one I recognized from every time Owen had a new idea. "He's worked so hard on this," she said. "He really thinks this is the turnaround." I said, "That's great, Mom." I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I called my attorney and asked her to pull whatever she could on the investment group. She came back to me 2 hours later. The group was small, 3 partners, one of whom had 2 prior business disputes on record. They were not the kind of firm you'd want holding equity in a family company. They were the kind of firm that got patient when they smelled distress and then moved fast when the moment came. I called Patterson. I asked him a few questions. Then I put on my good blazer and drove to the meeting. The meeting was at the Hartwell office, the actual building, which is a low, flat structure on the edge of an industrial park, with a lobby that has the same furniture it had in 2009. My father was there looking like he pressed his shirt twice. My mother was there in a blazer I didn't recognize, which meant she'd bought something new for the occasion. Owen was there in a suit that cost more than my first car and a posture that said he'd been practicing this. The investors were 2 men named Fitch and Delaney. They have the careful smiles of people who know they're the ones with leverage. Owen made introductions. When he got to me, he said, "This is my sister. She works in finance." He said it the way you'd say she works in food service. Accurate, technically, but calibrated to convey nothing impressive. Fitch and Delaney nodded and looked back at Owen. The meeting started. Owen presented. He had slides. The slides were optimistic in the way that slides are when someone has decided on a conclusion and worked backward to support it. He talked about the company's core strengths and market positioning and a proprietary client relationship model that was, as far as I could tell, just the fact that my dad was well liked. I sat quietly. I had a legal pad. I wrote down numbers. Some of them didn't match. About 40 minutes in, Fitch asked about the debt load. Owen said it was being restructured and that they had a solid relationship with the note holder and that it was essentially a non-issue going forward. I wrote that down too. Then Delaney asked about the balloon payment. He'd done his homework, and Owen said they were in active discussions with Meridian Capital Holdings about an extension. I looked at my legal pad, wrote the date. Owen said, "We expect that to be resolved within the month." He said it with total confidence, the kind of confidence that either means you know something or you've decided that confidence itself is a strategy. Fitch looked satisfied. Delaney leaned back. The energy in the room shifted toward handshakes and next steps. That was when Owen looked at me and made his mistake. He said, "You should really be taking notes right now. This is how real business people operate." My father looked at the table. My mother's jaw tightened just slightly. Fitch and Delaney kept their faces polite. I put my pen down. I took a breath, and then I said calmly, "Owen, I am Meridian Capital Holdings." The room went very still. He laughed. One short, disbelieving sound. "What? I bought the note on this property 2 months ago," I said. "I'm the debt holder you've been telling these gentlemen you have a solid relationship with." I looked at Fitch and Delaney. "I apologize. I think there may have been some misrepresentation about the status of those discussions." "There have been no discussions. This is the first I'm hearing of an extension request." Delaney set down his pen. Owen's face did something complicated. You can't. How did you? Legally, I said. "I bought it legally. You can call Patterson at the fund if you want to confirm. He'll remember me." My father said very quietly, "Sydney." I looked at him. "I want to be honest about this moment because it's the one I've thought about the most since." My father's face was not angry. It was something closer to grief. And I understood immediately that it wasn't grief about the business, or the money, or even about Owen. It was the grief of a man who had built something and then watched it become a thing his children used against each other. And I felt the weight of that. I felt it land. And I also knew, I know this sounds hard, that I was the only one in the room who had tried to stop it from getting here. I said, "Dad, I need you to hear me. I didn't buy this note to hurt you. I bought it because Patterson's fund was going to foreclose and I wanted to be the one holding it when this conversation happened." Owen said, "This is insane. You went behind our backs." "I went around the only door that was open to me," I said. "I tried to talk to you about the financials 2 years ago. You talked over me for 4 minutes. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Fitch said, quietly, to Delaney, "We should probably." "Yes," Delaney said. They gathered their things. Fitch paused at the door and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as professional respect, the kind you get when someone's done something you didn't see coming and you have to acknowledge it was clean. He said, "Meridian Capital Holdings," almost to himself. Then he left. It was just the 4 of us. Owen started talking fast. He talked about fairness and family and how our parents had given everything and how I was using a technicality to blow it all up. My mother said my name twice in the voice she uses when she wants me to stand down. My father sat with his hands on the table. I waited until Owen ran out of steam. Then I said, "Here's what I want to do. I'm not here to collect on this note. I'm not here to take the building. What I want is to sit down with a real accountant, not Owen, a real one, and figure out what this company actually needs to survive. And then I want to be part of making that decision." Owen said, "You don't have any right." "I own the debt on the building you're sitting in," I said. "I have every legal right. What I'm offering is to use that right to help instead of to collect. But I need a real conversation, not a slide deck, a real one." My father looked up. He said, "How bad is it?" And that was the first honest question anyone had asked in that room in months, maybe years, and I answered it honestly. I told him about the cash flow. I told him about the contract losses. I told him about the balloon payment timeline. I told him the number. I watched him absorb it. Owen said, "You had no right to go digging into our finances." I said, "The financials of the company holding your loan are a matter of public and private record. I'm a licensed professional. I used information that was available to me. The same information these investors had. The same information you chose not to share with Dad. That landed? I saw it land. My father turned and looked at Owen, and something passed between them that I don't have language for. Some recalibration, some quiet settling of a question my father had probably been carrying. My mother got up and left the room. I heard water running in the break room. Owen sat down. He looked suddenly like someone who had been standing on a platform that turned out to be cardboard. Not defeated exactly, more like a man discovering the actual dimensions of the room he's been in. He said, "What are you going to do with the note?" "That depends on what you're willing to do differently," I said. We talked for 2 more hours. Just the 3 of us. Dad, Owen, me at that table with the 2009 furniture. I told them everything I knew. Owen argued, then pushed back, then eventually went quiet and listened. My father asked questions. Real questions, the kind I remembered from those car rides in high school, and I answered all of them. By the end, we had the outline of something. I would restructure the note, extend the timeline, lower the immediate payment burden in exchange for an operational restructuring that I would oversee. An actual independent accountant would audit the books. 2 of Owen's most expensive recent decisions would be unwound where possible. A new contract strategy would prioritize renewal over expansion for the next 18 months. Owen would still be involved in the business, but not the way he had been. I hired the accountant the following week. Her name was Torres. Sharp. No nonsense. Had seen worse than Hartwell and fixed it. She found 3 things Owen hadn't disclosed to anyone, including a vendor relationship that had been running at a personal benefit to Owen for about 14 months. That one was hard. My father didn't speak to Owen for 6 weeks after he found out. I did not press charges. I want to be clear about why, not because I didn't have grounds, and not because I thought Owen deserved a pass. I didn't press charges because my father asked me not to, and my father is someone who has earned the right to ask me for something hard. I said yes. I meant it. What I did do was restructure Owen's role into something operational and supervised. He is not the decision maker at Hartwell anymore. He knows it. My father knows it. The new office manager who reports to me on financial matters knows it. It took about 8 months for the company to stabilize. It was not clean or easy. There were months where I was driving to that industrial park twice a week, sitting with spreadsheets, making calls, pushing back on vendors who had figured out the company was weak and were trying to renegotiate. There were conversations with my mother that went nowhere. There were dinners I was not invited to. There was a birthday in October that Owen did not call me for, and that one stung more than I expected. But the building is still there. The company is still running. 53 employees still have jobs. My father told me last month, standing in the parking lot after a meeting, that he was proud of me. He said it quietly and he did not repeat it, and I did not need him to. There's something I've been asked about a lot, by people who've heard different versions of this story. Did I plan the whole thing from the beginning? Did I buy the note knowing I was going to walk into that meeting and blow it up? The honest answer is no. I bought the note to protect my parents. I walked into that meeting because Owen invited me for optics. What happened was not a plan. It was information meeting moment, and I happened to be the person in the room who had done the reading. People sometimes tell me I should have warned them, that I should have gone to my parents first, told them what I knew, given everyone a chance to react in private before it became a conference room confrontation. Maybe. I've thought about that. But I also know my family. I know that a private warning would have become a private argument that Owen would have controlled the way he controlled every room he was ever in, by talking until no one had the energy left to disagree. The conference table was the only place where I had something he couldn't talk over. So I used it. I'm not going to tell you I feel good about all of it. I feel okay about most of it. I feel certain about the parts that matter. The building is still standing, the company is paying its employees, and my father is sleeping at night. Owen and I don't talk much, but we're not nothing. We were at the same table at Christmas, which is more than I expected 8 months ago. My mother and I are in the early stages of something that might eventually become a real conversation. She told me in November that she'd always known I was capable of something like this. I wasn't sure how to take it, whether she meant it as a compliment or a warning. Knowing her, probably both. What I know is this: I spent 30 years being the one who passed the bread and kept my mouth shut and did the math quietly in my head while everyone else talked. And when it mattered, when the building was actually on the line, I was the only one who had done the work. I don't need anyone to call that impressive. I just needed it to be enough. And it was. I keep coming back to one image from that day. My father's hands flat on the table, completely still, while everything around him shifted. He'd spent 20 years building something real, and in the end, the thing that almost took it from him wasn't a bad market or a difficult client. It was the gap between who he believed Owen was and who Owen had actually become. That gap cost him nearly everything. There's a version of cause and effect that people talk about like it's cosmic, like the universe is keeping score, waiting to settle accounts. I don't think it works that way. I think it's simpler and more mechanical than that. What you choose to see, what you choose to ignore, what you invest in, and what you dismiss, all of it compounds. Owen didn't lose his authority at Hartwell because karma showed up one Tuesday in March. He lost it because he had spent years making decisions without integrity. And integrity is the one thing that doesn't stay hidden forever. The books always balance eventually. I think about my own role in that too. I wasn't passive for 30 years because I was weak. I was quiet because I had learned, very early, that the room didn't want what I was offering. So I stopped offering it out loud and I started doing it anyway. On my own, in ways no one could see or interrupt. Some people would call that patience. I think it was something closer to persistence. The kind that doesn't announce itself, that just keeps showing up and doing the work even when no one's watching and no one's clapping and the bread still needs to be passed. What I did with the note on my parents' building required something I had to build deliberately over a long time. The knowledge to recognize what was happening, the judgment to know what to do about it, and the discipline to do it correctly when I had every emotional reason to do it sloppily. Those three things didn't come from talent. They came from years of quiet study, of doing homework no one assigned me, of caring about how things actually work, even when the people around me only cared about how things looked. City didn't win because she was lucky or ruthless. She won because she paid attention when it wasn't required and acted when it was. If there's anything I want someone to take from this, not as a lesson, just as something I know now that I wish I'd known earlier, it's that being overlooked is not the same as being powerless. The people who dismiss you are also the people who stop watching you. And if you use that time to actually build something, to understand things deeply, and act with honesty even when dishonesty would be easier, then the moment you walk back into the room, you walk in holding something real. I didn't need Owen to respect me at that table. I needed the truth to be in the room. It was.